Good afternoon and welcome to today's virtual media conference to apprise you of government's efforts to combat COVID-19. Today with me are the Minister of Health, the Honorable Terence Dialsing, the Minister of Education, the Honorable Anthony Garcia, and the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Stuart Young. The Minister of Health, the Honorable Terence Dialsing, will provide an update on COVID-19 in Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Minister Cox. Good afternoon to my cabinet colleagues, Minister of Education, the Honorable Anthony Garcia, Minister of National Security, the Honorable Stuart Young. Good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen of the media and to the wider listening and viewing public on a rainy Wednesday afternoon. So where are we today, Wednesday the 10th of June 2020? The global picture and the global numbers continue to increase. There seems to be no slowdown in terms of what is happening globally. The number of cases recorded, 7,389,298. So we are fast approaching 7.5 million cases. Deaths to date, unfortunately, 415,823. Those recovered to date, 3,698,167. So that's the global scenario, and as I said, it continues to evolve, it continues to increase. There seems to be no abatement in sight. What is the local perspective, the local scene? The total number of tests done to date, 3,462. Total number of unique patient tests done, 2,952. Total number of repeated tests, 510. Total number of community tests, 1,527. And I'm happy to report that all 1,527 community tests to date are negative. The total number of positive cases remains constant at 117. Total number of discharges, 109. Total number of deaths, unfortunately for us in Trinidad and Tobago, are 8. There are no hospitalized patients. What is happening in our step-down and quarantine facilities? The total number of persons that we have in these facilities stands at 43. And they are disaggregated as follows. At the UWI St. Augustine DB Penal Campus, we have 9. These were the 9 nationals admitted from Guyana on the 9th of June. In Cascadia, we have 2. In Tacarigua, we have 29 nationals who came in on the Carnival Fantasy, and they started their 14-day quarantine period on the 4th of June. So today is the 10th, so they have finished 6 days. They will have another 8 days or so to go. At Napa, which we use to house and care for our healthcare workers when they finish their tour or tours of duty, I am happy to report that that facility has no healthcare workers in it, none. And at the home of football, we have the 3 returning nationals who came in by air ambulance on the 28th of May. You would recall that one member of that family did test positive. And although the person was cleared to go home, the family took a decision to stay there for the rest of the quarantine period. So clinically, we have no one in the healthcare system. All we have are individuals finishing their quarantine tour of duty, so to say. So, Minister Cox, that's my very brief report for today, Wednesday, the 10th of June. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. The Minister of Education, the Honorable Anthony Garcia, will speak on matters related to the S.E.A. examinations. Minister Garcia.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon to the viewing public. Good afternoon to my fellow cabinet ministers. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to be given the opportunity to let our parents, our students, and our teachers know that the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago this morning at its meeting took certain decisions. Now, after very careful considerations and also discussions with our major stakeholders, in fact, we met with TUTA, Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association. We met with the Principals Associations, those are professional organizations. We met with the denominational boards, and in fact, we had discussions both formally and informally with a number of parents and other stakeholders. And after careful consideration and deliberation, it was decided that the S.E.A. examination, secondary entrance examination, will be held on Thursday, the 20th of August, 2020. Let me repeat this date, Thursday, the 20th of August, 2020. One of the concerns that was expressed by perhaps nearly all our stakeholders was the fact that our children needed to be acclimatized in the school system before they write the exam. As you know, since the 16th of March, our students were out of school. And although we made every effort at ensuring that our students weren't left doing nothing, in fact, this TV station did a number of classes on a daily basis so that our children will still have the opportunity of accessing the education that is their right. It was decided that for those students who will be writing the exam, they will be required to attend school from Monday, the 20th of July, 2020. They will be required to attend school together with their teachers. And of course, in the schools, we'll have our principals there to ensure that everything is done properly. So there are two important things which I want to bring to your attention. One is the date for the S.E.A. exam, and let me repeat, Thursday, the 20th of August, and the restart of the education of our children who are in Standard 5 in our primary school, that is Monday, the 20th of July. Now, we understand and we accept the fact that that will be a period where teachers will be on vacation. And we want to respect the right that our teachers are supposed to have an opportunity of enjoying their vacation period. As a result, we are asking our teachers to make themselves available. And when I say our teachers, the teachers of our Standard 5 classes who have been preparing our students for the essay examinations, we are asking them to make themselves available so that they will be able to impart that knowledge and that teaching so that our students will have an opportunity, every opportunity of performing to the best of their ability. Again, recognizing the fact that the teachers will be on vacation, it was decided that we'll offer our teachers a stipend. Now, this is not salary. It is a stipend because during the vacation period, the teachers will be getting their regular salaries. So we are offering them a stipend. And the stipend will be paid according to their attendance on a daily basis. And of course, the hours that we'll ask them to attend to the students would be normal school hours from 8:30 to 3 p.m. So for our assistant teachers, we have some assistant teachers who are engaged in teaching our S.E.A. students, just a very small number, about 5 or 6. We'll be paying them a stipend of $400 a day. Our teachers one, we'll be offering them a stipend of $500 a day. For vice principals, and this is in the case of a vice principal who teaches the S.E.A. classes, we'll be offering those persons a stipend of $650 a day. That is if those vice principals teach the S.E.A. class. And you know, in some of the smaller secondary schools where there are no vice principals and we have the post of a senior teacher, we'll be offering the senior teachers a stipend of $600 a day. heads of departments, again, where a head of department in the primary school is engaged in teaching, we'll be offering that person $550. And I've covered also, this is it, let me go it over. The principals, $900 a day. The assistant teachers, $400 a day. The primary school teachers, the teacher one, that is $500 a day. And the senior teachers, $600 a day. And all in an effort at ensuring that our teachers are comfortable with what we are asking them to do. I take the opportunity now to appeal to our teachers, in particular, those teachers who are engaged in preparing our young students for this exam, really to look at this as an opportunity where they can provide assistance to our students so that when those students write the exams, they will be writing the exams with relative comfort. All the related problems that are associated with this exam, we are asking our teachers to help alleviate some of those concerns and the stresses. I myself have been in constant contact with a number of parents who have been calling me almost on a daily basis. And many of them have expressed the fact that they are experiencing a great deal of stress. We are asking our parents, please take it lightly. Do not transfer that stress that you might be feeling on the shoulders of your students or of your children. And therefore, we are asking you to join with your class teachers or teachers of the classes where your children attend. Work together, join hands so that our students will be able to perform to the best of their ability. In addition to this, we have engaged officers of our Student Support Division of the Ministry of Education to visit the schools during this period and provide the necessary emotional support or psychological support that might be necessary in some cases. Because again, this is another issue that was addressed when we met with our stakeholders. So we are asking them, please visit the schools as often as possible to ensure that if there are any related issues, that those issues can be dealt with expeditiously. We have also asked our school supervisors to make constant and regular visits to the schools, again to make sure that the curriculum is implemented according to the dictates of the Ministry of Education. And in an effort to continue giving support to our teachers, our curriculum officers also will be visiting the schools, all in an effort at ensuring that our students are exposed to quality education, and when they write the exam, they will be able to perform to the best of their ability. At this point, I pause in case there would be any questions that I'll be happy to respond to.
Thank you very much, Minister. Before we move to the questions, we have the Minister of National Security, the Honorable Stuart Young, who will address issues related to government's management of the borders and the return of nationals. Minister Young.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to my cabinet colleagues, Minister Cox, Minister Dialsing, Minister Garcia, all of the media personnel, and most importantly, all of our viewing and listening public in Trinidad and Tobago and outside. This afternoon, I pick up the conversation from where I left it off on Saturday last. And really, it is to remind people what it is we're doing with our borders. As you all are aware, it was on the 23rd of March that we closed our borders to both nationals and non-nationals. As we've stated already, and it's worth stating again, all of our nationals will return, and we are very sympathetic and have a lot of empathy for all of our nationals who are outside of Trinidad and Tobago who wish to return. As we've said repeatedly, there are over 330,000 nationals outside of Trinidad and Tobago, and at the Ministry of National Security, we have literally been receiving thousands of requests. Now, the management of allowing persons back into Trinidad and Tobago is being done very carefully along with our public health system. What we're doing is we're balancing really a few things. First of all, we took a policy decision as a government to state quarantine all persons returning. You've heard from the Minister of Health, the Chief Medical Officer, and other medical personnel over the last few days and weeks how we're doing with the COVID management in Trinidad. So one of the things we decided to do, every single national returning, we have been putting them into state quarantine facilities. As we also started to have a little bit more capacity, we've been dealing with certain very small categories of people and having them in state supervised quarantine facilities. That is about to start, and I'll give you the details with respect to that in a short while. So the balancing exercise is not only the capacity that our public health care system can do from the point of view of quarantining people, because then of course if there are positive cases of COVID there and we've quarantined them, at least we'll be making sure that the people can be treated and they have not gone out with their positive cases into our community and we begin to have community spread in Trinidad. That's the policy decision and the reasoning based on science and medical evidence for the state quarantine. So that's the first capacity issue. How many can we really hold in our state quarantine facilities? Of course, you cannot mix people coming from different jurisdictions all together because then you run the risk of contamination and spread amongst different groups of persons who may have come in without the virus, mixing with others who may have come in with the virus. The next issue that we are always balancing and which plays a part in the formula is, God forbid, if there is in fact a spread of persons who have re-imported the virus into Trinidad, we need to make sure that our parallel healthcare system built out to handle positive COVID cases is not overrun. So those are the factors, those are the considerations. There are secondary considerations that we are bearing in mind, persons being repatriated from areas where there's still the spread of COVID taking place. Because whilst Trinidad and Tobago is in a good place, and that's by no fluke, while we are in a good place with our COVID cases and the management of it, there are other jurisdictions in the world where it is still being spread. There's still thousands of persons being diagnosed on a daily basis and deaths taking place. So understanding that those are the deciding factors, I'd now like to give an update as to exactly where we are with respect to the numbers, because you all would have heard me say on Saturday that we are bringing back close to 1,000 persons. That week has started. So the first thing I'd like to say is yesterday, we finally got the return of some persons who had been given well over a month ago permission to return to Trinidad from Guyana. So we had 9 return yesterday and they are currently in state quarantine. We are also having some more cruise ship workers come in. At this stage, we have 3 additional sets of cruise ship workers who are scheduled to come to Trinidad and Tobago. We've granted the exemption. We have the Disney Cruise Line who are bringing another 7 workers. They are scheduled to arrive on Tuesday, the 16th of June. We have the Norwegian Cruise Line who are bringing 19 plus 1 permanent resident, so 20 persons on Monday, the 15th of June. Then we expect on Friday, in 2 days' time, the 12th, about 326 to 360 Trinidad and Tobago nationals to return on the Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Right now, they're being consolidated in Barbados. They're stocking up with supplies. Now, what is interesting, the number keeps going up, it keeps coming down as nationals on these cruise ships take decisions as to whether they want to come to Trinidad or they don't want to come to Trinidad. So right now, we're catering for 326 to 360 nationals on the Royal Caribbean cruise line. We have negotiated, I'm happy to say, that a specific dedicated vessel will be used for the quarantine of all of these nationals. When they come in, we've made arrangements, our health personnel, to test every single one of the nationals. Those tests will then be put into the system. They will all be quarantined on the ship in separate rooms, separate cabins, with their own washroom facilities to keep that quarantine safe. They will be monitored on a daily basis. This is an important point. All of the personnel who are being allowed into Trinidad are being monitored daily by our health personnel. So it's not only about capacity of rooms in the state quarantine sector, it's not only about possible availability of other rooms outside, for example, in some hotels that I'll get to in a short while, but we also need to make sure that we have the medical personnel available to, on a daily basis, monitor everyone who's under quarantine. So of course, those numbers begin to add up. So these 326 to 360 cruise ship nationals, cruise ship workers or nationals will be on this ship for 14 days, and we will do the monitoring process. If persons present positive, out of anyone who returns, they will be immediately taken into a parallel healthcare system set up to deal with positive COVID cases. So we always need to be mindful of those numbers. We are also having, and we're in the throes of the final stages of confirming our University of West Indies students returning from Barbados, 85, and right now we have 167 UE students who are up in Mona, up in Jamaica, who are also looking to return. So we're working out the flights. It may be that on Saturday, those from Jamaica return, and then on Monday, those from Barbados return. We're also in contact with the authorities in both Barbados and Jamaica to help them with the repatriation of their students. So already just with those two categories alone, we're well over 600 persons who will be in our public health care system under quarantine. In addition to that, there are some students who are on ships outside. They're doing a maritime degree or maritime courses with the University of Trinidad and Tobago. And as part of that, they have the practical side where they must go out on certain cargo ships and be out at sea for a number of months. We have been letting those students, as the ships return, disembark and go into state quarantine. So there's a few small numbers there as well. And there are some instances like this where some nationals as well, during the course of return via their yachts, we've quarantined them in Shaka Shikari under the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, and after they finish their period and they're tested, they're allowed to disembark. In addition, you all would have heard me mention that we successfully managed to negotiate a company that had 5 workers in St. Kitts and Nevis to pick up Mr. Jaglal Singh, visually impaired gentleman who was in St. Lucia with underlying health factors. They were coming in today, or they may have arrived by now. So 5 of them, and they would be the first persons that we managed to negotiate. Their employer was willing to pay for them to be under state-supervised quarantine in a hotel. So they are the first 5 that will go into state-supervised quarantine at a hotel at the employer's expense, but on a daily basis be subject to our doctors doing their monitoring. So Jaglal Singh will go into the free state quarantine system. We also have, finally, it appears, our nationals who have been in Venezuela. We have 29 of them returning this Friday, the 12th. We have also managed to fit in 49 of our nationals who have been working in the Gulf of Mexico, 2 separate companies, one with 38 and another one with 11. So that's 49 of our nationals returning from Mexico. They will be the second set of persons, or another set of persons who have agreed, their employers have agreed, they're working in the oil and gas industry, to allow them to quarantine in a specific hotel identified by our Ministry of Health personnel, and they will be there at the expense of their employers, but under the state-supervised quarantine. It is not possible for us to just open up and allow all of our nationals to return based on the number of hotel rooms, etc. Because as I'm saying, there are 2 important factors: that we have the medical personnel who can on a daily basis examine these persons, make sure they're keeping in accordance with the state quarantine protocols as outlined by the Chief Medical Officer. But then also, we also always have to factor in the overall numbers. If there are outbreaks and there are persons who've re-imported COVID and we start to have a positive spread, can our medical system that has been built out to deal with positive COVID cases facilitate them? So those are the main factors. So we also have the group returning from Curacao. The government of Curacao is coming to repatriate their personnel, and there were only 4 nationals. So we could manage to fit in those 4 nationals into our current state quarantine facilities. So they are supposed to return, we're hoping, on the 11th of June. In addition to this, there are a few in between that we have, and we're also looking at the possibility when bringing in the UE students from Barbados. There are a couple other students that we may be able to bring in. In a nutshell, those are the main categories of persons, there are also the deportees who are being deported from the United States. That is towards the end of this month. So we're also preparing facilities for 26 potential deportees to to be deported back to Trinidad and Tobago. I have seen it reported in the newspapers as well that one of our ambassadors, our ambassador to the United Nations, Ambassador Beckles, she did request an exemption. Her being an ambassador returning to Trinidad and Tobago, that exemption has been granted. She is making her way back here of her own volition, making her own arrangements, and she will also be put into quarantine facilities and pay for her own quarantine facilities. So she will be under state supervised quarantine. Additionally, there was a possibility, and we managed to negotiate it, for a small plane to bring back a few persons, a mother who recently had a child and was suffering some issues related to that child and a family. We managed to be able to fit them in as well under the state supervision quarantine. As the government, we would love to be able to just open up and bring back all of our nationals or larger numbers of nationals. But the numbers that I've just told you all about equate to over 850. And to have 850 in our system for the next 14 days as we manage it, as we monitor, we believe there may be certain positive cases. In fact, I was just sent a story coming out of Barbados this morning with their repatriation, out of their repatriation. And just in the last 24 or 48 hours, there were 4 positive cases. So we believe there is the likelihood or the great possibility that in the repatriation of our nationals, there will be positive cases that will present, and we need to be able to manage it. As you would all be aware by now, it's normally a 14-day quarantine period, so that is also another factor. So the next big batches that we will be looking at of allowing nationals to return, because we have significant numbers of our nationals in the United States, in Canada, the United Kingdom, who have been writing and asking to return, and we want to get to the point where we can allow them to return, but we need to get through the next 2-week period with this 800 plus that I've just listed here, and then after that, if persons present positive, we need to air out the facilities, but we will balance the numbers. So we really move in 14-day cycles and the availability and the capacity. So far, fortunately, in the repatriations that we've had within the last recent times, we've only had 1 positive case present. The first set of cruise ship workers, some of them have already gone home. So we are managing the numbers. So the message I'd like to send to all of our nationals, because they correspond with me daily, they send messages to my phone, they've been retaining lawyers, they've been sending messages through the media. We want to bring all of you home, and you will all be allowed to be brought home. But it has to continue to be in this very managed and controlled manner to continue to protect the population of Trinidad and Tobago. We have managed to protect all of those who are here present in Trinidad and Tobago. And it would be a crying shame at this stage for us to lose the results of all of this that we've all been doing as individuals over the past few months. We are going to get to the point of bringing back our nationals from the United States, from Canada, from the United Kingdom, and from other areas, the same way we've been managing now. Once we get over these large categories of numbers, we will then immediately be moving, and we'll be looking at the timing for allowing these persons to return and how to manage that process in our state quarantine facilities, and for some who we may be able to put in the state supervised quarantine facilities. The next issue I'd like to discuss with you all today is there is a group of workers, a group of nationals who are farm workers in Trinidad who on a seasonal basis have gone to Canada to work on farms in Canada, and they have been requesting the opportunity for themselves to go to Canada. There are a few messages I'd like to send. We know as a fact that these farms in the Alberta province, as well as the Ontario province, do have positive COVID cases. We know for a fact that these farms in Alberta and in Ontario have been having COVID spread. In fact, unfortunately, very recently, workers from other CARICOM islands, we've had a few deaths at these farms. So we're aware that the farms have the potential to be spreading COVID. That's point number 1. 2, the Canadian authorities have a specific, there's no free healthcare in Canada, the way we have free healthcare here in Trinidad. So we're also mindful of this, of our nationals going abroad and being exposed and catching COVID virus and being exposed in Canada. They are not able to get the Canadian health insurance as well when we've done the research. So they will be out there with the potential of being exposed to COVID, becoming positive COVID cases, and not being able to get the medical healthcare attention. We as a cabinet have discussed this. We do not want to prevent any of our nationals from leaving our shores to go and take up employment opportunities elsewhere. So the Attorney General's office has been in contact with other jurisdictions. There is going to be a certain indemnity letter for each one of these workers to sign, acknowledging that they are putting themselves at risk, acknowledging that where they're going to, there are positive cases of COVID, and there is the possibility that they may contract the COVID through spread, and then furthermore, that if they do so, they will not be allowed to get medical health care in the Canadian system unless they have insurance, and they will not be available to get insurance. They don't qualify for the insurance in Canada. So they're doing so, in other words, at their own risk. We, the government, have warned them, but as I say, we're not going to stand in the way of these workers going. That document is currently being prepared by the Attorney General. I will grant, as the Minister of National Security, permission for all of these workers to make their way. They will have to make their arrangements to make their way to these Canadian farms and then to go ahead and to work. Of course, they will be subject to the same thing like all of our nationals outside, that if when they're ready to return home, our borders remain closed, they will be subject to the exact exercise that has been taking place since the 23rd of March. No guarantee of date of return as we continue to manage the system. There will also be one important condition put to them, that if when they're ready to return and we can't grant them permission to return and the borders are still closed, they will have to pay for their own quarantine facilities when they return to Trinidad and Tobago. So that's the other issue I wanted to address today, to let all of those workers who wish to go to the Canadian farms know that the Cabinet has taken the decision that they may proceed to go and work, understanding the risks that they're putting themselves at, but we will facilitate their departure to go to Canada from the point of view of granting the exemptions. I'm sure they will make the arrangements to be able to get up to Canada and to continue with the work that they would like to do there. So in a nutshell, the main points were that we continue to allow the entrance of nationals. Over the next 14-day period, we are not going to be in a position to accept large amounts of nationals coming home because we are at full capacity with our state quarantine facilities as well as our state supervised quarantining with our medical personnel being not stretched but at capacity. So for the next 2-week period, we're not going to be in a position to take on any more large numbers. There may still be opportunities because there are a couple others that we're looking at and that we've granted exemptions to, some of whom will be corresponded with within the next 24 hours in small groups who may be able to come back to fit into the limited spaces we have left in our state quarantine facilities or the state supervised facilities. In addition to all of this, we have continued to be working with the energy sector and allowing, I forgot one category, of workers as well. There's a rig outside there that came in from some other area of the world, and before they hit our borders a few weeks ago, their contract in Trinidad was terminated, so I think they went to Aruba. There are about 68 nationals as well in the next week who will be returning on this rig that we've granted exemptions for. Those 68 nationals will be allowed to quarantine on the rig. So they also fall into this category of about 850 plus people that we'll be handling, monitoring, assessing, and keeping our eyes on in state quarantine facilities or state supervised facilities over the next 14-day period. And during that period, we will start to calculate and work out who are the next big batches of persons that we will allow in. So to all our nationals outside there, we understand how difficult it is for each and every one of you, those who have the medical circumstances, those who are in difficulty. Unfortunately, because of this global pandemic, we remain steadfast in trying to get you home, but our message to you, until we can get you home via the exemption process that I've described, please continue to shelter in place. We are aware of your difficult circumstances, and we are working as fast as we can, including trying to expand our capacity to be able to bring you home as soon as possible. Thank you very much, Minister Cox.
Thank you very much, Minister Young. That's very good news for returning nationals.
Yes, it is.
Members of the media, the floor is now open. Remember to identify yourself and the media house you represent before posing your question. We want to give as many of you an opportunity to post questions to us. But that means in our limited time, we will have to give each media house a chance to get a maximum of 2 questions in. Once we have completed the pool and time allows, I will come back to you. So let us keep this in mind as we begin taking your questions. Newsday.
Good afternoon, all. Shane Superville from the Newsday newspaper here. I have
Good
2 really quick
afternoon.
questions. The first one for the Minister of Health. It has to do with remarks made yesterday by epidemiologist Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove from the World Health Organization, in which she suggested that transmission of asymptomatic COVID cases may be very rare. I just wanted to know, in light of this development, what this means for us and our own efforts to control the spread of the disease. And the second question I will direct to Minister of National Security Stuart Young. It has to do with respect to the return of Penelope Beckles, our United Nations ambassador. Just like to know whether or not she was granted an exemption to return home this weekend.
Okay, so I'll take your first question, and thank you very much. I discussed this very matter just before coming to the press conference with the Chief Medical Officer, and I will tell you what his exact words were. It's a good thing we never fell victim to testing asymptomatic people in Trinidad and Tobago. It's frightening how right we were from February in not testing asymptomatic persons. That was his reply. And I think we kept saying there's so much we don't know about this. And testing asymptomatic persons did not make sense then, surely is not making sense now. So thank you for that question, Shane.
Minister Young.
Thank you very much, Minister Cox. Mr. Superville, I just said, with no doubt, and just for a degree of certainty now, I want to clarify, yes, there has been an exemption granted to Ambassador Penelope Beckles to return to Trinidad and Tobago. The last I was aware, she's in the process of making her arrangements to get here because, as you all are aware, there's still no commercial flights being permitted into Trinidad and Tobago. And I expect her to get here within the next few days, maybe, possibly before the weekend. But yes, when she applied as ambassador, she was granted an exemption to return to Trinidad and Tobago.
Very much, Minister Young. I-95.5.
Good afternoon, Ruth Fielden from I-95.5. My 2 questions are for Minister Young. Regarding the repatriation flights from places like the US and Canada and so forth, has any consideration been given to using those flights as a vehicle to bring TNT nationals in those countries back home? And my second question, with all that's been going on with respect to COVID as well, what happens to the Venezuelan migrants as they come to the end of their 1-year period? Many of them are saying they cannot do business because their cards would have expired and they haven't gotten the cards for the additional 6 months. So they'd like to have some insight as to what the future holds for them as well.
Minister Young.
Thank you very much. Okay, with respect to the first question, just to clarify what I said a short while ago, it is not only about the ability to get persons here, right? Because at the end of the day, as you've heard the Prime Minister say a number of times, there are airplanes parked up all over the world dying to get back up in the air and fly. Right now, we're managing the numbers. So as I said, we have over 850 in the next couple of weeks. So we could not manage to bring back the big groups of numbers that are currently present in the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, where there's some of these repatriation flights taking place. Those flights also have their protocols where they're doing social distancing and spacing from a health and safety point of view on the planes. I suspect those will be the next batch of people we'll be looking at, trying to get back here as quickly as possible. And at that stage, we may be able to engage in some discussion with the use of those planes for repatriation. But I can tell you, even with the repatriation flights that we were permitting into Trinidad at the request of other governments, we've had to limit those as well, because we just need to be cautious and continue to protect our space here in Trinidad and Tobago. With respect to the Venezuelan registration cards, I don't believe there are any Venezuelan registration cards that would have expired as yet. I don't see how people could be saying that, because the cards are dated on the dates that they were handed out or the dates that they were printed up. And that process did not start, if I remember correctly, until at least the end of June, if not July of last year. This is one of the issues that will be taken to Cabinet, and I will make my recommendations to Cabinet as to what we should do with respect to these 16,523 Venezuelans that were registered last year who subsequently got their cards. We are very aware of what is happening in Trinidad and what is happening in Venezuela. So I will make certain recommendations to the Cabinet, but it will be premature for me to say anything at this stage because Cabinet has not as yet taken a decision. But we continue to have, I can say this, the same humanitarian outlook towards our fellow human beings that we did last year. We continue to have that same outlook at this time.
Let me just further expand on Minister Young's question to part one of Mr. Turner's question. Returning nationals isn't only a function of airplane seats, it is also a function of the parallel healthcare system to accommodate them. So you could have 10 jumbo seats, 10 jumbo planes with 5,000 seats coming in. It doesn't mean that we could accommodate 5,000 nationals at the same time. So just to further emphasize, Minister Young and myself, we work closely. He gives us the figures and what he expects. We give him the figures of what facilities we have, when facilities are available, and that is how we work it out. So it's not only a function of airplane seats available. So I hope, Mr. Turner, that further clarifies the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. 98.1.
Good afternoon to the panel. Stephen Cummings, 98.1 FM. My two questions quickly, one for Minister Garcia and the other for Minister Diaz. Let's start with Minister Garcia. Minister Garcia, there's a view that despite the laudable efforts of the Ministry of Education, many students have had the misfortune of not being able to have access to the ministry's portal or ICT platform for continuous learning. Has the ministry been able to do a full assessment of some of those issues in terms of numbers or percentages and possible remedies? And Minister Dayal Singh, we are in an election year, and as a policymaker, is there any consideration or are there guidelines for quarantined nationals, or persons who may have found themselves in quarantine, who may wish to vote, or, you know, what would that look like in the exercise of their national civic right?
So I'll take the second part first. We will work with the EBC, and the EBC is the one that manages elections. And if they ask us for any advice, we will so provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
To answer your first question, I think in some areas, the information that was translated to the general public wasn't totally accurate. I saw in some of the newspapers where people stated that over 90,000 students did not have the opportunity of accessing online learning and online teaching. This certainly is not so. Our supervisors have been asked to conduct a survey, and they have been filtering the information to the Ministry of Education, which tells us that those figures that were presented are totally wrong. We have had the opportunity, as I stated earlier, to focus on the students in Standard 5 who were preparing for the S.E.A. exam. Every day, TTT carried lesson programs. It started with these programs being conducted on television twice a day for 2 hours, and then it was expanded to 4 hours. So any child who had access to a television, that child had the opportunity of interfacing with the television and also getting information with respect to what was being taught. The feedback that we have been receiving from that exercise has been most encouraging. In fact, we have received letters, phone calls, text messages from parents who have complimented us in our efforts at ensuring that we did not leave their children untaught. The second aspect is that the devices that are available to facilitate the online learning and teaching could be done by a simple, what we refer to as a Me Too telephone. It doesn't have to be any elaborate electronic device. And again, the information that we have, now remember we are focusing on the S.E.A students. The information that we have is that most of these students have had the opportunity of using these devices, simple telephone, simple cell phone. So as I began by saying, it is not entirely true or accurate to say that 90,000 of our children did not have that opportunity. We have approximately a little more than 19,000 students who will be writing the S.E.A examination this year. And from the feedback, again, that we have been receiving from our supervisors, our school supervisors have been out on the field. They have been visiting the schools. They have been interfacing with our principals. And the information that we have been receiving from them tells us that a very large number of our students have been in a position to access this information.
Thank you very much. We move to AZP News. AZP News.
Hi, good afternoon. Prior Bihari, azpnews.com. Minister Young, can you state how many nationals are outside? How many exactly of them have applied to come back in and from what countries? And to Minister Garcia, initially you had said that S.E.A would have been held in October, and even Tutor has said that they would have rather the S.E.A take place in October rather than August. Can you tell us why August was chosen as opposed to October? Because it seemed that there wasn't general consensus among the stakeholders for the choice of August. Thank you.
We go with Mr. Young first.
Thank you very much. I don't have the exact number as at this moment in time. It is well into the thousands as to the number of persons who have applied for exemptions. With respect to the countries, just to give you an idea, we have from the United States, from Canada, from the United Kingdom, we have from Russia, we have from Saudi Arabia, we have from Australia, we have from India, and we also have from other Central American countries. So that is just to give you an idea of the types of jurisdictions where people are who have been applying for exemptions.
Thank you, Minister Garcia.
Yes. Originally, when we were looking at all the parameters with respect to the S.E.A exam, we thought that October would have been a good date. But remember, we were in the process of consultation and discussions. And when we discussed with our major stakeholders, it was found that an August date would have been a better date to write the exam because it would have allowed us to have the school system return to normalcy from September the 1st, when school is originally scheduled to be reopened.
Okay, thank you. Move to Guardian Media Limited.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Rashad Khan, Guardian Media Limited.
Good afternoon.
I just have two questions. One for the Minister of National Security as well as for the Minister of Education. So the Minister of Education, could you just expand a little bit for us on any of the safety protocols for students and teachers who would be going back out to school on July 20th? And for the Minister of National Security, could you let us know of this some 1,000 persons that you listed that are expected to be coming into the country, exactly how much or what percentage of those are going to be paying for their own quarantine, and what criteria is being used to select these persons to pay for their own quarantine as opposed to going to a state facility?
Minister Young.
Okay, thank you very much. I can't give you the percentage. I could tell you, for example, as I thought I outlined, those who are coming in from Mexico, their employers agreed to pay for them to be in a hotel and be under state supervision. So they're small, it's a very, very small number. And how we're deciding that is based on what Minister Dialsing and I have been trying to explain, that it depends on the capacity of our public health care system and the parallel system and who we can fit in between. And it is when the employers are the persons who have offered to fly their employees in. The vast majority of these are those who are working in the oil sector, and then they are in a position to be able to afford to pay for their employees as well to be under state supervised quarantine.
Minister Garcia?
Yes. We are making sure that all our schools are properly sanitized. Our providers of the janitorial services have been engaged in all our schools to ensure that these schools are properly sanitized. In fact, as you would have known, officers of the Ministry of Education, including myself, have been visiting schools also on a regular basis to ensure that this process is ongoing. In addition to this, our students will be asked to wear masks when they enter the school. We are still at the point where we are discussing with the Ministry of Health whether the students will be required to wear masks when they write the exam. So that has not yet been determined. And the third one is we have to maintain social distancing. We have had the advice that students must distance themselves a minimum of 6 feet, and we will be putting things in place so the furniture will be arranged in such a way that they will maintain that social distancing. So these are some of the things that we have to make sure that are put in place so that our students' health will be preserved.
Thank you. 91.9.
Yes, hello, good afternoon, everyone. For the
Good
next of
afternoon.
91.9 FM. I wanted to ask the Minister of Education, in terms of the S.E.A date being set for August 20th, what would that mean in terms of results, and when would students go back out to school? When would these new secondary school students enter Form 1? If you could give us some details on that. And also trying to also come to terms with how the teachers are being compensated. Has it been discussed with the teachers, as opposed to offering the stipend, offering time off, or is it that we have to look at a financial solution? Is that a situation that it's fixed, that we have the budget, we have the money to cover these kind of additional expenses? I know we are looking into securing it, but the real question is, where is the money coming from to continue to pay teachers in addition to what we already do pay? If you could answer those two, thank you very much.
Okay, let me take your last question first. The Ministry of Education will be in discussion with the Ministry of Finance to identify funds that are in our budget so that we can have the necessary payments made. The second question concerns the organization of school. Schools are scheduled to resume on the 1st of September. The students will be writing the S.E.A exam on the 20th of August. They will be required to remain at home until results are issued. We are hoping, working with CXC, to have those results released somewhere around the 8th of October. Now, don't hold me to the date, but we are looking at that date or around that date. And if we are able to achieve that date, then we are looking at somewhere around the 19th of October, where those children will be able to go to their secondary schools. It would mean then that they will be home for about 6 weeks, but because the first term is 15 weeks, they will have quite a large number of time in their secondary schools. This will allow for the intake beginning in our primary schools of our first-year students. So our first-year students will enter the school in September, and they will move on. The students who are at present in first-year infants, they'll move on to second-year infants and so on, right up to standard 5. The same thing will happen in secondary schools. Those students who are in Form 1 will move up to Form 2, and that space will remain for them for at least 6 weeks when the new intake will take place. So those are the things that we have in mind. The important thing is that we are working with CXC and also with our officials at the Ministry of Education to make sure that these things are put in place and the results are issued as soon as possible.
Astronaut Health.
Astronaut Health newspaper, Gwyneth Stewart. Good morning, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Gwyneth.
Good afternoon, Gwyneth. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My first question is to the Minister of Education. As a follow-up to my colleague from Guardian Media's question, in light of the fact that many S.E.A. classes consist of 25 to 40 students and may have to split up into separate rooms, is there a specific plan to manage this? I heard you mention 5 or 6 assistant teachers. I didn't quite get what you were saying there, but is it that each principal will have a limit of 6 teachers that they can use to assist with the S.E.A. classes? And will the school feeding program be in place for these children, all of them, or would it just be for the ones who were receiving school feeding before, or would it be for no one? That's one question. My next question is to the Minister of Health. How soon can we expect patients at Port of Spain General Hospital to be allowed more than one visitor and for visiting hours to be reinstituted to twice per day?
Okay, so I'll take the second part first. We don't have a date in mind. We are playing this day by day, week by week. It must be remembered that we are in the middle of a global pandemic. As Minister Young said, we are allowing people to come in. With that 1,000 people coming in, there's a chance of the virus entering. So to keep our hospital system virus-free, to protect our patients and our staff, I can't give you a date. It will stay in place for as long as we deem necessary for protection and to save lives.
Okay, to answer your question, I said just now that there are very few teachers, assistant teachers, who teach S.E.A. classes. And those numbers would be about 5 or 6 or 7. And that is what I was referring to in terms of payment. And I'm saying that those teachers will be paid a stipend of $400. With respect to maintaining social distancing, this is one of the reasons why, as I keep repeating, our supervisors have been visiting our schools, and also officials of the Ministry of Education are also visiting the schools. There are schools that have halls that can accommodate 1 or 2 classes in the halls, maintaining social distances. There are some schools that have dividing walls or dividing boards, and we have been asking our principals to ensure that those walls or those boards or those partitions are removed, so again we can maintain social distancing. We are working quietly but efficiently to ensure that that element of social distancing is maintained.
Okay, Express. Okay, we moved to TTT.
Hello. No, I'm
You're
hello.
on? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Good afternoon, ministers.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Kim.
Hi, good afternoon. Ministers, Minister Dayal Singh.
Yes.
I would want to ask you if you are, I'll use the word satisfied at this time with how pandemic funding is being spent, the procurement of whatever facilities, physical or other facilities to make this time as easy, as productive as, for everyone. And also specifically, if you've satisfied that out of that, I would say enough then is being spent on I'm just going to say you as Minister of Health need, I'm talking PPE, personnel in hospitals, treatment facilities and other facilities being kept up, etc.
Yeah.
And sorry, my other question, I'll be quick, maybe Minister Young or maybe also Minister Dayal Singh. If you could give us, again, we may have done this, but if you could give us again, for instance, if a hotel is going to be used for quarantine and it's going to be paid for by the employers of the patients, persons there, what kind of personnel, etc., does the state have to put in there? How many police officers or guards or however they are kept, how much medical personnel has to go into something like that to ensure that it remains watertight as the state would want it to be? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll take the first part first. So let's go back to the funding. Cabinet would have approved a total of 147 or $157 million for the pandemic effort for the 4 RHAs in Trinidad, and an additional $50 million for the TRHA. So that's a total of about $207 million. We started to do some preliminary figures today. because right after here we have to go to the Parliament for Standing Finance Committee. And to date, preliminary figures say we have spent around 47 to 50 million. So we are nowhere close to exhausting the allocation first approved by Cabinet. So I am quite happy with it so far. Thank you.
Minister Young.
Thank you very much. There was one element I thought Minister Dialsing would touch on. So at the state quarantine facilities and also at these state supervised facilities, there are really two elements that you have of public workers. You have the security element, which is provided by the Ministry of National Security, a combination of both the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service as well as our Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force. And I'd like to thank them all for the great job that they've been doing throughout this whole COVID pandemic. Secondly, there are healthcare workers as well. We always have nurses 24/7 at these facilities. And then I assume there's also an element of doctors at these facilities as well. But I know there's always an element 24/7 of our nurses at these facilities.
Thank you. We move to TDT.
Good afternoon, Crystal Wilson, TDT Limited. I have two quick questions for the Minister of Education. The first is taking into consideration the August 20th S.E.A. date for this year's exam. Is the ministry considering a later date for the 2021 exam, just because of the children being prepared for that exam? And can you speak to the incentives for teachers with respect to the private schools, or you're unable to say?
Okay. We are still looking at the writing of the exam by our students in 2021. That has not yet been determined. We have determined the school calendar, and as I said, the school term will begin on the 1st of September for the first term, and that first term will last for 15 weeks. They'll go off on vacation for 3 weeks and then return in January and so on. But in terms of the actual date, we have received a number of recommendations which we are looking at, and in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, we'll determine whether we are going to allow the exam to be held sometime later in May, or whether we'll stick to the original date. That's one. Secondly, with respect to the private school, and I have been receiving a number of questions with respect to the private schools. Now, the private schools are managed by private organizations or by private individuals. And I am appealing to those organizations and those individuals to do exactly what we are doing, and that is to give our students a chance at the exam and a chance that will allow them to write the exam to the best of their ability. And this will involve, as we said, at least 4 or 5 weeks prior to the examination, as we have done. So we are hoping that throughout the system, both public and private schools will start somewhere around the 20th of July.
Thank you. Loop Titi.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nico
Hello,
Pascal
Nico.
here from Loop News. Minister Garcia, I just have one question for you. With the new dates in mind, what about students who require concessions, these special needs students? How have they been factored into the new plan, and has any communication with parents of these students been happening recently?
Officers of our Student Support Services Division have been engaged with a number of our parents, particularly parents of students who have special needs. And again, we have not forgotten them. We are doing everything to ensure that those students will be adequately taken care of. You know, there are some concessions that we give to students with special needs, and those concessions will apply.
Thank you. We move to CNC3.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Hi, this is Shiny Gray.
Hello.
From CNC3.
Good afternoon.
Good day, good day.
Hi, my question is for the Minister of National Security. I took note of the fact that you said you're trying to get all Trinidadians back home. There's a group in the US, and they are spread out all over, but they're being organized by one woman. I think her name is Dr. Belpon. Could you give them some advice as to how to make their applications to return home more attractive? Because their thinking was, if we do separate requests, we're not going to be as attractive. But if we apply as a group, but they did say that they had been denied. So could you offer them some advice, because they're very stressed and everybody's trying to get home all of a sudden.
Thank you, Minister Young.
Thank you very much. There is nothing that can really be put in an application to make it more attractive. As we are very much at pains to emphasize, it really depends on the numbers. So that group has been increasing from 109 upwards. As I said a little bit earlier, we are very aware of our nationals in the United States, in Canada, and the United Kingdom. We are going to get you home. I came here today to explain that right now we're dealing with between 850 plus nationals in our state quarantine and state supervised quarantine facilities. And as soon as we get through those numbers, even before we reach the 14-day period, we are going to start looking at addressing. So yes, Dr. Belfon, and they've gone to lawyers, and I'm very aware of what they're doing, and they're asking persons to go to the media and to tell your stories. I understand, we empathize, we know how difficult it is for each and every one of you. So it's not about how attractive your application is, it is the numbers that we're looking at. And if there are planes that are going to be coming from these jurisdictions, for example, the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States, they're going to be coming with significant numbers. So that's why we're working to be able to take our nationals back from these countries, and we're working out those numbers. But right now, for the next 2 weeks, we are at capacity.
EV6.
Hi, good afternoon. Alicia Boucher from TV6.
Good afternoon.
My question, I have a three-part question for Minister Garcia. That first question is, would the stipends that are being offered to teaching staff, would it go straight to their salaries and therefore being subject to taxes? Also, would support staff also be getting stipends like those school supervisors and so forth that you would have referred to having to visit the schools? And what is the budget that the Ministry of Education has set aside to facilitate this entire process in terms of a figure? The second question goes to the Minister of National Security. Have you worked out in terms of a number in the second batch of nationals returning to the country, or that hasn't been worked out as yet?
Okay, let me answer the questions that you have asked. The last question you asked in terms of budgets, we have budgeted $20 million to make sure that our teachers are adequately compensated. With respect to whether the teachers will be required to pay income tax, I'm aware that every earning of any individual is subject to income tax. So if teachers are receiving the stipend, I am sure, in keeping with the dictates of our Inland Revenue Department, those students will be subjected to income tax.
Thank you very much, folks. We know that you have lots of questions, but we have come to the end of today's virtual media conference. Do remember that the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Communications are your only credible sources of government information on COVID-19. Tomorrow, religious institutions reopen, and we wanted to share with you some of the guidelines from the Ministry of Health. These guidelines apply to all services and activities, including weddings, funerals, and wakes. The ministry advised that the head of each religious organization train members of staff in order to ensure the recommendations are followed and implemented. The guidelines stipulate that attendance be calculated for each building based on a measurement of 36 square feet per person. For instance, 1,000 square feet equals 27 or 25 persons, while 10,000 square feet equals 278 or 250 persons. The elderly should be given the option to attend services separately and apart from the normal services. It is recommended that each service not exceed 60 minutes, and where there are multiple services, there should be no less than 45 minutes between each service to allow for sanitation and cleaning of the religious facility. If it is possible, please limit congregating to no more than 2 days a week. However, multiple services are allowed on the same day. The Ministry of Health is asking that religious institutions establish a housekeeping schedule to incorporate routine cleaning and ensure cleaning and sanitization happen before and after all gatherings and services. This is not a full suite of guidelines, but we are encouraging you to get a copy and become familiar with the measures in place. It is available for download on the Ministry of Health's website, www.health.gov.tt. There are some persons who were asking about the use of the temperature. What is it, Minister Health?
Thermometer.
The thermometer to
yeah,
test the temperature.
Yeah.
There were some folks asking about that. And we just want to let you know that, yes, it is indeed a recommendation, and we hope that most persons will be able to use it, but it is a recommendation. I am Donna Cox, Minister of Communications. Thank you for joining us today as the government continues its efforts to keep the curve flat and beat COVID-19. Stay home, stay safe. May God bless Trinidad and Tobago.